This is Reality Dispatch, written by Jim Minns.
The moon lit her path to an extent that she did not require a torch. The long walk would have led its flame to die out before she arrived at the large iron door. Catarina was the oldest and bravest of her 5 siblings, and, since the death of their father, the task of delivering this request to the warlock fell upon her. She did not fear an encounter with the one whose castle looked down upon their village. She feared the alternative, his unwillingness to help. She walked up the side of the cliff face as the air chilled around her, and the breath that exerted could be seen. She knew not to show signs of weakness as she approached the castle, for she did not know who was witnessing her ascent. She resisted the urge to rub the goosebumps from her exposed shoulders. At the foot of the iron door, she looked upon the piercing, bulbous eyes of the figures etched into the metal, like souls dwelling in the hells of Dante's Inferno. They were petrified, locked into place for an eternity. She raised her hand to knock loudly when she thought she saw one of them move its eyes across her body, as if assessing her as a threat. The enormity of her actions was not lost on her. No one approached the warlock's castle. It was forbidden by all authorities. Many years ago, an agreement was reached between the castle dweller and the community that separation would be heeded forever, unless exceptional circumstances required. So long ago, this agreement was reached that it was almost mythical amongst Catarina's generation. On this night, she brought with her exceptional circumstances. She drew back her wrist in anticipation of the knock when the doors opened inwards of their own accord. They swung back slowly on their large iron frame and presented the vast expanse of the interior of the castle. It was magnificent, lit by the light of the moon, a blue hue. She stepped inside slowly at the invitation. She was presented with an empty void, a cathedral with no furniture. 10-foot stained glass windows lined the walls to her right, where the moonlight illuminated grotesque and horrifying imagery. She had not seen such artistry that was not displayed in a church. It depicted acts of murder and violence, anti-Christian iconography. She blessed herself and felt dread build up in her throat. She began to wonder if her plan to make contact was a mistake, the desperate attempts of a naive village girl to seek assistance from a threat in the form of a marauding army that would bring death and destruction to her and her village. The chill in her veins made her feel that there could be no greater threat than the one who lived in the confines of this evil place. "Explain your presence," came a deep voice that echoed off the walls and high ceilings and travelled to the entrance to her ears, where it arrived like a thump in her chest. "I am," she began as she scanned the dark blue walls for the location of her host. "I am Catarina Hunyadi. I am here on behalf of the community of Hysteri, below your castle walls. I believe you knew my father, the voivode?" she asked. There was a deathly silence before the voice returned in a boom that once more echoed off the walls and rattled the stained glass. "I knew your father. I knew his father before him and his before him, and so on and so on. I knew every one of your lineage," the voice said. Out of the shadows in the depths of the castle emerged the hooded figure into the light of the moon. It was wearing a hooded robe, its face entirely in the darkness created by the hood. The figure travelled so elegantly that Catarina believed it must be floating rather than walking, for there were no rises and falls that one would expect with footsteps. "I mourn his loss," said the figure. "So, you know that he has passed?" "I know all," the figure said as he came to a pause a few feet from Catarina. "I know you will not enter my home at a depth greater than can be escaped for fear that I will make you my prisoner. My child, I cannot comfort your fears by assuring you that this will not occur. You are right to fear me and to fear what I am capable of. That was the agreement that was arranged between our two worlds," said the figure, removing his good and exposing the fearsome face that hid beneath. Catarina took a step back in fright towards the open doors that still gave her a chance to make a run for it. He had the eyes of a serpent, the teeth of a wolf, and the stare of a lion. His pale skin glistened in the moonlight, and his presence gave a perpetual state of aggression. "You stay away from here, and I promised not to tear you apart. That was the agreement," the warlock yelled as it lunged for Catarina, its claws emerging from the cloak, its eyes turning colour from stalking green to blood red. The iron doors snapped shut, trapping her inside. She faced the sculptures who moved around into position, holding their hands out to prevent her escape. She turned back to her captor once more, whose face was inches from her, his snarl and teeth exposed. She found the courage to speak, for the alternative didn't help her brothers and sisters below. "The Titus barbarians are coming!" she screamed. The warlock closed its mouth and sealed its teeth. It floated backward and replaced its hood over its deformed face. "You break the agreement to share this news?" "Yes." "You risk death?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because there are some things that are a fate worse than you," she said under heavy breathing. "You fear these marauders more than you fear the darkness that I can bring upon you and everyone you know," the warlock queried, a sense of annoyance in his tone. "I can assure you, warlock, I do fear you as much as I fear the army that is approaching. They did things to my father that I cannot begin to explain. I know that they will do the same to us, the same to you. Unless you help us," she pleaded. "Help you. Please, we need your help. Our agreement is under threat if they take us over and destroy our town. There is no one left to defend us. That is why they sent me up here to talk with you. They don't expect me to come back alive, but if I do come back, they will know it's because you will agree to kill as many of them as you can to help us and save our way of life." It was all she could think of to get his opinion to shift in her direction. She knew not what would make the monster think in terms of humility. From all the evidence presented, the man was the personification of evil. She didn't know if pleading for his help in good faith would have any effect, but it was all she knew what to say. "You are negotiating with forces you could not possibly comprehend," the warlock began as it floated over to a stained glass window depicting the placing of a body on a spike as the person's insides rained down on a crowd watching below. "The Titus barbarians worship a demon who lives outside a realm I am familiar with. If I choose to go to war with them, I am confident of victory, but I want something from you if I am to do this. For, my dear, I could live side by side with a new reign of terror in the town below. This would not affect me, but I'd much rather keep our covenant alive." Catarina ran down the path towards her village. Snow had begun to fall, though she did not feel the cold. She weighted her heart that was heavier than dread. She had made a deal that she knew she would have to betray. She feared the consequences of her denial of his advances, but for now, it was best to concentrate on the fate that would befall the Titus barbarians. She took mild comfort in knowing she would get to see the torturers and murderers of her father suffer and die for their actions. She was ashamed that she had to give her hand in marriage to the evil being to have this achieved. That would be a convenience that she would have to break as soon as the deed was done. She knew the monster wouldn't stop searching the ends of the earth for her at her act of betrayal. She ran down the clifftop faster and faster, hoping her lungs would pop and her heart would give out. Maybe this would allow the monster to honor his deal and grant her a reprieve from a destiny with the devil. The town was buried under a foot of snow as she ran under the gates and rang the bell to signal her return.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.